happened in Russia over a week with the bombing of St. Petersburg subway system. Unfortunately, a number of people were injured and people were actually killed by a suicide attack. Well, the subway system of St. Petersburg is quite large. It's 19th busiest in the world, and with almost 2 million passengers every day. But actually, it hasn't been attacked before in a major scale. There were some attacks on Russian subways a bit earlier in 2010. 38 people died in a double suicide bombing on the Moscow subway system. And a year later, a bomb exploded on a high-speed train traveling between Moscow and St. Petersburg, killing 27. And both attacks, as with this attack in St. Petersburg, they were claimed by Islamist extremist groups. Well, we're actually we're happy to and very lucky to have Bektour here, because Bektour is a co-founder of independent news website in Kyrgyzstan, Kloop, which actually dig in deeper in the story of the identity of the bomber, because he is from Kyrgyzstan. But there was a lot of confusion at first about his identity, about his ties to Islamist groups, about his ties back to Kyrgyzstan. And in my opinion, there was a lot of even racial profiling, because it's a terrible issue for Russia and treatment of Central Asian labor migrants. And I think it piled up in a very kind of nasty story. But you dig deeper and you actually find something interesting about his identity and his roots back in Kyrgyzstan.
Yes, you know, we covered this attack immediately after it happened. Actually, we had like a live text updates, you know, still without knowing, of course, who is the suspected attacker. Then the next day, it was announced that it is a person who was born in Kyrgyzstan, who is, you know, the prime suspect according to the Russian police. So then we started having, first of all, a huge number of phone calls from Russian journalists. But at the same time, what started happening is, you know, Russian media labeling this person immediately as a terrorist and using this word, although it's still not proved that he actually carried out this attack. So what we did, we tried to find as many people as possible who knew him personally. Mm-hmm. So this story that is on the screen, it is about neighbors, teachers, relatives, and friends of Akbarzhon Dzhalilov, the main suspect. We decided, you know, to post a counter-narrative, as we called it, because Russian media were already full of xenophobia in the comments section, especially xenophobia against Central Asian people, and as I said, you know, this labeling person as a terrorist immediately without the proof yet. We decided to find out more about this person, who he was, you know, as a child, as a teenager, and then later when he moved to St. Petersburg and started living in Russia. And we found out a story which absolutely doesn't go with, you know, the idea of him killing someone, because everyone describes him as a kind person who was not even religious that much.
Well, at the same point, it's a quite not very rare story when there is huge gap between those who knew, you know, people who were involved in terrorism, and then, you know, the actual horrible acts they commit. And
definitely, I mean, the fact that he was not religious and the fact that he you know, was living a totally different life does not mean that he could not carry out this attack. But at the same time, there is, you know, such a thing as presumption of innocence,
sure,
which I'm always sticking to, because, and this was a key quote from one of his school teachers, because she was annoyed by the fact that everyone is already calling him a terrorist. And she asks, you know, this very direct question, like, how can they do that? While the investigation is not over.
And there was a second story as well.
And then we had the second story, because another thing which is completely underreported right now is how his relatives are being treated by security services and the police in Kyrgyzstan. Mm-hmm. What we found out is that his uncles were all interrogated for almost 24 hours after they were invited to
local Kyrgyz.
In Osh, Kyrgyzstan, yes, his hometown. seems like it's an interrogation both by the police and by security services. They spend too much time. According to the law, they should not have, spent that much time. What is even worse, his younger brother, who is a minor, he's still under 18. He spent even more time. He spent 2.5 days being interrogated. So he basically had to spend at least 2 nights also at the building of the security service in Osh, Kyrgyzstan, without having a lawyer, without having any grown-up near him.
But is it something that happens very often in Kyrgyzstan, or?
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, our police and our security services are sadly famous for torturing people sometimes, for beating people up. Like one of the most prominent human rights activists in Kyrgyzstan, Azimzhan Askarov, he is sentenced to life imprisonment and, based on fake accusations, in my opinion, which were kind of fabricated by the police, I think, and many other human rights activists think the same way. So this is a worrying trend for me right now. The other worrying trend is that, when something like that happens and there is at least a suspect from a certain country, and in this case it's my country, then basically the whole population starts suffering from crazy stigma that is going on every border. And just to end this part, like in January there was an attack at the nightclub in Istanbul, and the first person who was named as a terrorist was actually a person from Kyrgyzstan, from the same city of Osh. And in that case, it was proved that Turkish security services were wrong. He was in Kyrgyzstan when the attack happened. So there is already a precedent of, wrongly naming someone from my country as a terrorist.
Well, it's also
then,
it's also a fascinating development because it connects and entangles all those stories from countries that are regularly underreported in the post-Soviet region, not only in Eastern Europe but also in Central Asia. That is completely under radar, not only of international media but also even local sub-international media in the Russian-speaking region. Well. That's unfortunately all the time we have for tonight. Again, I'm really glad that Bektour joined us to help clarify a lot of stories that take roots even in Central Asia but have direct effect on Eastern Europe. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'm really happy. I think I'm the first person from Kyrgyzstan at Hromadske International.
I'm pretty sure that's the case, but we would like to have you back sometime soon.
You.
My name is Maxim Aristavi. I encourage you to watch all the extended interviews and larger segments on the Hromadske International website at an.hromadske.ua. My name is Maxim Aristavi. I'm a journalist, and I was glad to be co-host of the Sunday Show tonight as well. Have a nice weekend, and tune in to the Sunday Show next week as well.